Hello, my name is Melvyn Westreich, and my profession is physician. I was an emergency room physician, a general surgeon, plastic surgeon. But at my age now, they won't let me out of the house, much less touch any kind of patients. So I can't take care of people, but I can do something else that I do, and that's tell stories. I wrote a book called Murder in the Kollel. I was wondering whether maybe somebody would like to hear the story when I read it out of the book. If you enjoy it, that's wonderful. And I hope that there will be many more subscribers to listen to the book. Begin with the prologue. The murderer surveyed what had been accomplished and was very proud. Rabbi Avraham Klein swayed gently back and forth, suspended by the noose around his neck. The rope went over the water pipe and was secured to the basement support post. It was in perfect position. Getting the rabbi's heavy bulk so high off the ground had been the murderer's biggest concern, but with a little ingenuity, problems could be overcome. The rabbi had barely stirred when the noose was first put around his neck, and only really woke when the murderer slid the noose close, crushing his windpipe and closing off the blood supply to his brain. The rabbi had opened his eyes and recognized the murderer, but then it was too late. The murderer had apologized to the rabbi. "I'm sorry. It could not be helped. You left me no other option." But the murderer was not sure that the rabbi actually heard, because he was thrashing about, grasping and pulling at the noose that was strangling him. All that ceased after a few moments. The murderer placed the highlighter and the Bible on the table and looked around to see if everything was in its proper place. A little more housekeeping was needed, and then the murderer could be completely satisfied. People would say, "What a shame. Rabbi Avraham Klein had committed suicide." Chapter 1. Not what it looks like. This cannot be good. Effie was on a mission. Effie, short for Ephraim Salzburg, was the official bearer of bad news. He was not a student and not a rabbi. The 47-year-old bachelor had occupied the corner table of the Beis Medrash, yeshiva study hall, for decades, not being a great Talmudic scholar. Far from it. The rabbis of the yeshiva would call upon him to do various housekeeping chores, take attendance, chastise frivolous students, stuff like that, and deliver bad news. He was now weaving purposefully through the maze of tables of the Beis Medrash. Someone was in trouble. The learning dynamic of the large room was totally different from any study hall in any major institution of learning. Study halls at the university were expected to be enveloped in an almost tomb-like silence so that each individual could concentrate on the subject at hand. The Beis Medrash was exactly the opposite. At each one of the 60 or so tables scattered around the large room, there were at least 2 and sometimes as many as 6 bochrim, the plural of bocher or student, who were chanting phrases out loud or making vociferous comments about the subject they were studying. Some were engaged in even louder arguments over the meaning of phrases cited in the books they delved. My study partner, Shraga Halperin, was diligently and yes, loudly trying to teach me the logic of the Talmudic text we were studying. A glimmer of understanding seemed to be just beyond my grasp, but was getting closer. It suddenly dawned on me that Effie could be headed my way. I had a sudden sphincter spasm. Sure enough, when he reached my table, he, Effie Salzburg, my personal Malach HaMoves, angel of death, said officiously, "Lincoln, Rabbi Kamenovich wants to see you in his office." And then to emphasize the fact that he considered me in deep trouble, he added a command, "Now." The hubbub at the tables around me died down and changed to an ominous silence. Bad news. Effie turned and began walking back to his table, signaling with his hands to the silent students at the adjacent tables that they should return to their learning. I could not be angry with Effie. He was only the bearer of the bad news. It was not his fault. It was mine. I had been expecting this summons for the past 8 months. I guess I really was in deep doo-doo. See how I changed? Even when I think to myself, I say doo-doo instead of the S word. 8 months ago, the S word and the F word would have punctuated just about every other sentence. That was just one of the things that Rabbi Kalmanovich said I had to work on if I was going to be a Chose B'tshuva, one who repents and returns to the ways of the Torah, and had any success in the yeshiva. He said that even in my thoughts, I had to train myself to refrain from using words and phrases that were considered crass or crude. So I guess I really have changed. In fact, a lot of good it was going to do me now. Rabbi Kalmanovich was about to drop the hammer, and I was going to be the one that was blown away. I think Shragai knows what the summons means, and he just keeps looking at me in silence. I closed my volume of the Talmud and gave it a respectful kiss as I put it on the pile at the corner of my table. I stretched and arched my back, which was stiff from sitting these last few hours. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and put it on as I stood to my full 6 feet. I was not the tallest man in the Beis Medrash, but at age 37, I was definitely the oldest of the Bachar. I was even older than some of the younger rabbis. I closed the top button of my shirt and did up my tie. I pushed my yarmulke, my skull cap, to the back of my head and covered it with my black fedora that had been lying on the table. How appropriate. For now, I was still wearing the official uniform worn by all the other Bacharim in the Beis Medrash. A white shirt, black hat, black suit, black shoes, and a black tie. It's a sight to behold. In order to imagine what we look like, think Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, dressed as Elwood and Jake Blues. Now multiply that by 300 Bacharim, get rid of the iconic sunglasses and substitute in their place the fringes of the tzitzis, the small prayer shawls poking out from the Bacharim's pants. You get the picture? I thought to myself that a black outfit was just perfect for facing a firing squad. Really appropriate. This was only my second visit to Rabbi Kalmanovich's windowless study at the center of the building. I knocked and entered. Nothing had changed. The groaning shelves which covered the walls and every flat surface held sets of books bound in leather or the classic blue or burgundy. All the remaining nooks and crannies were crammed full of single-volume works. The gilded markings on the spines had been worn off long ago, and the rabbi probably knew what each book was by its location in the room. Rabbi Kalmanovich sat behind his small desk, intently studying a large copy of the Rambam, Maimonides. I had noticed that when the rabbi studied a text, he had a nervous habit of slowly stroking his voluminous gray beard, and every 30 seconds or so he would adjust the black skull cap on his head. I could almost feel the wheels of logic that were shifting in his mind. His total belief in God, coupled with his photographic memory and an absolute mastery of the Talmudic knowledge, filled me with a feeling of awe. Every time I looked at the rabbi, I felt that I should be seeing some sort of visible aura or halo. So far, no halo, but the aura still remained. At first, I thought that he was not aware that I had come in, but he looked up momentarily from his text and said, "Please take a chair." He was sitting in his shirt sleeves, his frock coat and hat hanging from a peg, jutting out from one of the shelves. I wondered whether this was some sort of a test that the rabbi sent to each of the guests that visited his room. Obviously, he expected me to take the one chair that positioned opposite his desk. The problem was that it was piled high with books. I suppose he wants to see whether I will just stand or try to find some place in the crowded room to accommodate the books from the chair. Last time I was here, I decided to move the books and caused a minor avalanche. Once more, I shifted the books and placed them on top of a gravity-defying stack already on the desk, and I just hoped for the best. God willing, it will not come tumbling down. Once I was seated, Rabbi Kalmanovich looked up and closed his book. He seemed to be forming his words in his mind before he spoke. Here it comes. Reb Shimon, began the rabbi. He always called me by my Hebrew name with the honorific title of Reb, a title I did not deserve. I think you might know why I've called you here. Of course I know. Rabbi Kalmanovich was going to throw me out of the yeshiva for being the dumbest bacher in the Beis Medrash. He had warned me from the start that he was not sure that I had the stuff needed to study in the yeshiva. He also told me that once he made up his mind, he would tell me straight out if I could or could not continue in the yeshiva. I knew from the outset that it was really a stupid move to try and start cramming my brain with material that should have been learned 20 years ago. Even the slowest high school kid in the Beis Medrash knew more than I did. Yes, Rebbe, I know, I said, staring down meekly at my shoes. I did not have the nerve to look into Rabbi Kalmanovich's steely blue eyes. I thought you would, said the rabbi. I'm very pained by this whole incident. Oh, terrific. I have caused him pain. Now I have got that on my conscience as well. He told me when I first came to him that not everyone needs to learn in a yeshiva. But I insisted. Now look at where we are. I'm sorry, Rabbi. When do you want me to leave? I guess the sooner the better. My, you are the clever one. As it says, who is a clever man? Someone who can deduce an item from another item, said the rabbi with a chortle. I don't know exactly. I will speak with Rabbi Lipsky and see what he has to say. Maybe next week. You'll need a place to stay in Lansing. Who was Rabbi Lipsky? There was no one in the yeshiva by that name, and where was I suddenly so clever? And what did he mean, maybe next week? And what about Lansing? Excuse me, Rabbi, I interjected. What does Lansing have to do with my leaving the yeshiva? A smile of understanding broke out on Rabbi Kalmanovich's face. Oh, I see. You think I called you in to ask you to leave the yeshiva? Of course I did. I know my progress is extremely slow. You warned me that I might not be able to keep up. Isn't that what this is all about? Shimon, said the rabbi in a soothing tone. Of course your progress is slow. You're trying to make up 10 years of missing learning in one. To you it seems slow. To me and your teachers, your progress is amazing. When you first came, you could hardly understand a word in Hebrew, much less in Aramaic. Here it is 8 months later and you're studying Gemara. It's phenomenal. So you're not throwing me out of the yeshiva? Absolutely not, said the rabbi with finality. Then what are we talking about? I asked, totally confused. Let me try to explain, said Rabbi Kalmanovich. Did you hear about the death of Rabbi Klein from the Kollel in Lansing? One of the Brachim had explained to me that a Kollel was a freestanding Beis Medrash that usually did not have a direct affiliation with a large yeshiva. Small groups of Jewish scholars sat in them and learned all day. Some Kollels had teaching programs for the community and some did not. I think I heard something about it a few weeks ago. Sorry, I'm in the Beis Medrash most of the day and I don't get to see the TV or newspaper. I apologized. To make a long story short, Rabbi Kalmanovich died last month and the police are convinced it is a case of suicide. I spoke to the police and they were very reluctant to give out any information, but they assured me they have concrete evidence. I was getting an inkling as to why the rabbi wanted to talk with me. Before donning the Blues Brothers outfit, I had been a police detective and a private investigator. I knew that it was a statistical fact that rabbis seldom committed suicide, but I also knew that the Lansing police force was a highly professional group, and if they were convinced that it was suicide, it probably was. How can I be of help? I asked tentatively. Rabbi Klein was my Talmud, my student, and I knew him for over 20 years. He did not commit suicide, said the rabbi emphatically. I don't know what happened there, but Avram Klein did not take his own life. I see, I said slowly. Well, the police in Lansing are very good. It's hard to imagine they would make such a mistake. Nevertheless, they are mistaken if they think the death of Avram Klein is a suicide, said the rabbi determinedly. I cocked my head to one side and asked, where do I fit into this whole thing? As I said, this whole incident pains me, said the rabbi, and then he paused. That Avram Klein is no longer with us pains me greatly, but it pains me even more to think that perhaps there is someone that took Rav Avram's life, and he's walking free. The Holy Book says, Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof. Strive for justice. I want justice for my Talmud, Rav Avram. Well, the police might be right, and it is a suicide. It could be. Then I will apologize to you and anyone else and accept my loss. What I'm asking you to do, and it is purely a request, please turn me down if it makes you feel in any way uncomfortable. I know it's a terrible thing I'm suggesting. You're so dedicated to your studies, but I would greatly appreciate it if you would take a short recess from the yeshiva and look into Rav Avram's death. This is something in which you are an expert and I'm an Am Haaretz, a boor. The yeshiva will cover your expenses. Whatever you discover, I will accept. But until you tell me otherwise, I am sure, absolutely sure, Avram Klein did not take his own life. Rabbi Kamenovitz stated quite clearly that he was only making a request, and he said that I could turn it down, but a polite request from him was just like a command from anyone else. Sort of like an offer you can't refuse from Don Corleone, but without the sleeping with the fishes part. Most of all, it was Rabbi Kamenovitz making the request, and I knew I could not turn him down. Besides, after 8 months of being the absolute dunce among all the Bachra in the Beis Medrash, it would help to bolster my ego, which was now residing in a bottomless pit, to show off a little by doing something I was good at. If I had to say so myself, and I had accommodations to back me up, I was a darn good detective. Probably would take me only a day or two to sort through the material in the Lansing police file, and it would be a good break from the seven-day week, 24/7 intense study of the past 8 months. But most important, and absolutely the most, I was not being thrown out of the yeshiva. Whoopee. Rebbe, I would be more than happy to take a look at the case. End of chapter 1. Tomorrow we'll do chapter 2.